What I think a lot of times happens though is people think, oh, I want to save all my cash so that I can take advantage of those opportunities. But what happens is they don't make those investments in their company, the infrastructure. That's that superintendent you need. That's the second project manager. That's the executive level. That's the accounting.
And
that's the finance.
can I make a note about that? You do not want to get debt out for that.
No, you don't want debt out for that.
If you go out and say, I'm going to go get debt out so that I can hire more people, you're done. I mean, you need to use your own capital, your own retained earnings to fuel the infrastructure needed to support more job growth.
Welcome to the Mobilization Mindset. My name is Scott Peper, CEO and founder of Mobilization Funding, and today Drew Aldridge and I are back at it, answering your questions. You can see the first of our questions on our YouTube channel at mobilizationfunding.com. You can also go to our website, mobilizationfunding.com, where you can find all of our podcast episodes, question and answers, Drew and I, Drew by himself, me by myself, all the stuff you want to hear. In the meantime, today's episode is going to be more questions that we hear all the time from construction contractors just like you, and we're going to address those here today. How do I compete if owners and GCs only care about the lowest bid? I think the first thing to realize is owners only care about price when they see you as nothing other than a commodity.
True.
And if you are only a commodity, then you will only be judged on price. Now, does that mean that if a general contractor is only judging you on price, that you are now a commodity? No, it means that they may not know you. They may not know how to see you. You may be new to a market. They may be new to a market. They might just be a really bad general contractor. And a general contractor that thinks that way is probably a good indication that you're probably not the kind of general contractor you might want to work with, or they're not the kind of general contractor you might want to work with. You have to decide what kind of company you're going to be. And you have to decide what you're going to stand for. And you got to represent what you're going to stand for. And then you find customers, jobs, projects, people, employees that you can fit and execute well on. And yes, that doesn't mean you're not going to have to be competitive in price. You can't just say, I'm going to be a high margin, high price in a market that doesn't command that. But there are people, and I'm assuming the question is coming from the standpoint of these folks only care about price, and so I just have to figure out how to deliver at the bare minimum at the lowest possible price. And you could be a company like that, but you better be really operational great and lean and mean to make money. I think most people want to focus more on doing really well at a competitive price, and that means having a solid margin in place. And the way that I would go about doing that is I would think about your customer selection and starting back to who do you want to be? How do you want to represent yourself? And it goes to what we talked about before very often on this show or LinkedIn posts or YouTube channel in many ways. You have to be undeniable with your performance. And when you lead with performing and you build a reputation of this person just performs and they just perform and they perform, people want that more than they want price only. And the combination of that reputation and your approach coupled with a fair price will win. Now, if you're a rip and bid scenario and you're bidding on, DOT work, yeah, it has to be the lowest price. But you've already chosen that field at that point. You already know those are the rules of that game. So I'm going on the assumption that this question is coming more from you're not focused only on DOT work and the rules of that game.
No, yeah, I mean, I think you hit it on the head, Scott. I mean, I think early on in your company, or when you every company has kind of an inflection point, and you ask yourself as an owner, how am I going to compete? If you choose to compete on price, then you better expect to generate a lot of volume. Right? Because your margins are going to be a lot thinner. I mean, as I've said in other videos, the industry structure in a sense has low barriers to entry. So in a sense, there's a lot of new entrants, there's a lot of competitors, which inherently drives down the price. But there are two concepts, which I've mentioned in the past, but I'll mention here, if you don't want to be owned by the prevailing price in the market, right? And that's really being judged by your competitors. You're going to have to do one of two things. You're going to have to either focus on a specific sector so that you can own that sector. You can be the best at that sector, garnering a higher market price for the work that you do for a variety of different performance reasons and a track record. Or you kind of outlined it, Scott, you can differentiate yourself. And differentiation can be product differentiation, but obviously in the construction space, this is going to be operational differentiation. So you functionally do the same exact thing your competitor is doing. You functionally do the same exact thing on the particular project. Your scope of work is relatively the same, but you actually just execute it very differently. And if you can find innovative ways, I was talking to one of our customers the other day, and they were talking about how do we increase the productivity? How do we increase output for the same amount of employees in a construction company? I said, well, you're not going to replace, direct labor with AI or any sort of technology.
Right.
But what you can do is you can differentiate yourself from a technological standpoint on the overhead and how you execute your work through the tools that you use to actually increase the overall productivity per person on the job or per person in the back office, which drives down your overall your overall cost.
That's right.
Which then, you're competing on the same price, but you're actually garnering more favorable margins. So focus and differentiation, you've got to figure out how you're going to compete. And if you do want to compete on price, you better differentiate your delivery.
That's right. The other thing is you can use price if that's the point. I like to call it a yes-if philosophy. And if someone asks you for a lower price, you can say yes if you can pay me in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or yes, I can give you a lower price if I can invoice you every week and you pay me within 7 days. Well, no, I can't do that. Okay, well then I can't do that price. And anyone else that takes that price, let me give you 5 or 6 questions, Mr. or Mrs. General Contractor, to make sure you ask them this question, because if they're going to take it for that price and deliver it to you at the standard of performance that you outlined in your RFP and that you demand and expect, they better be able to accomplish these 4 or 5 things really, really well. Because if they don't, this is where they're going to fail. And so at least at a minimum, before you accept their price point that you're asking for, ask them these 5 questions and make sure they can answer them this way. And what that's going to do is give that general contractor some not only an education on what's going to fail if they can do it, but it's going to also give them it's going to empower them to let them know that these are critical points. These are really important items that need to be happening in the scope. And if I dip below the price point, I want to know where those risks are. And it might also help separate you from that ultimate person who's offering a lower price, and they don't see you as a commodity anymore.
Yeah, and just one thing on that, I don't want to take for granted that this is a widely held and understood concept, but for those of you out there that are considering bidding on jobs or in current negotiations with your general contractors, if you have 30-day payment terms, and then they come to you and say, hey, can we have 60-day payment terms with you, or even longer? You need to be compensated for that, because they're pushing their risks downstream to you. And with increased risk, you need to require a higher return. So you need to also make sure that you understand sort of your cash flow modeling. How does that affect your overall business? Not just on that project, but how does that ripple effect through the downstream effects of all of your other operations or your other projects? So if you have a choice, hey, you have 30-day terms or 60-day terms, you better make sure that those longer term contracts, payment terms, come with some sort of reward for you. And you should hold firm to that, because if they're not willing to budge, then it's probably not the right contract. They're probably asking for longer payment terms for a reason. There's probably a lack of clarity. And you need to make sure that you and the GC are on the same page from day one. And if it starts like that, you are not. You need to tread very, very lightly.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to float 30 days worth of cost, especially the first 30. If you start 2 or 3 weeks into the month, you get an invoice in within 2 weeks, totally different story.
Yeah.
If you're floating 60 days, you're working an entire next other month that's supposedly in the flow. You're not just like mobilizing, but you're like in the flow. 4 or 5 more weeks of labor. You're going to have material invoices due at that point. You're going to have to order like the bulk of your stuff. I mean, it's a different, not every 30 days of cost is the same. And you start pushing 60-day terms, you're now getting deeper into that project, which is going to have a bigger bulk of your cost too.
Yeah.
So things
That's
to pay
exactly
attention
right.
to.
That's exactly right.
Change orders. What's the line between being flexible and being weak? Change orders. That's a lot. There's a whole pile you could go into with change orders. Let's start with the flexible versus weak. Okay. I think you need to go know what your contract is, first of all. Have you signed a contract that says you have to do every scope of work that you're asked of, or you are automatically in default? That's a problem. Are you considered abandoning the job contractually if you don't do work when specifically asked? Is the scope of work so clearly defined that we know it's a change order and they also know it's a change order, or you think it's a change order and they're not so sure it is? Those are the kind of things you want to know about in advance, because before you go about proceeding on a quote unquote change order, you want to know and make sure that everybody agrees this is a change order, and it's just a matter of whether you're going to actually do it or not, and we're going to go through the process to get paid. Or if they're asking me to do work that I believe is not in my scope, but they're not saying exactly, hey, this is a change order work.
Yeah.
That's two totally different scenarios. And I've seen a lot of construction companies operate with the same philosophy in both sides of that scenario.
I mean, like, what is leverage? How does leverage really play in that? Because I can just picture a scenario. In fact, I heard about this specific scenario a few months ago. You know, new GC, existing GC with a lot of experience. Our sub really wanted to work with them. Been trying to work with them for a long time. And then throughout the project, there are these sort of, are they change orders? Are they not change orders? Kind of, it's almost like the GC was using their leverage to essentially get more work out of the sub, which is costing the sub money. Can you walk through sort of that process and how you can verify?
Yeah, I mean, look, the reason I went right to contractually, your contract, on this question is because a lot of it determines what's in your contract. If you're up front, for example, before you even start the job, you're negotiating your contract, and you say, look, I'm going to be really clear, and you're building your scope of work out, your schedule of values. It's rock solid, okay? It's very objective. Either it's in the scope or it's out of the scope. And there's always some gray area, so I don't mean to say like you're going to spend so much time on your schedule of values that it's so rock solid. But for the most part, you can draw a line to when something's asked differently that's not in the scope. So let's just operate under that premise for a second. The next thing you want to do is, do you have a set way in your contract before you started of exactly how you're going to price a change order? I'm going to invoice material this way. Who pays for it? Do you have to provide the material? Or if it's a change order and there's material involved, can you require them to order it? Or who? Or when? Can you bill it differently?
So you're talking about, it's not just the definition, like what does a change order constitute in the contract, but you're saying how is a change order executed?
Right, because a lot of the reason issues come up with change orders that everyone agrees this is a change order. But what a lot of the debate is how much are we going to charge for this change order?
Yeah. When are we going to bill? When are we going to bill?
Yeah, so if I'm in there and I say, look, my labor rate on change order is going to be X, and let's just say, for example, you're billing, it's a four-man crew, and for example, I'm just making this up, but your four-man crew, you're going to charge for change order work $2,000 a day. Well, then it's and you're painting, for example. Well, then it's easy. You have a four-man crew. This is a change order. It's going to take me 3 days. I'm going to bill $6,000. It's already in the contract. If it takes 3 days to do, and someone else is saying to you now, well, let's say you don't have anything in the contract. And you're like, it takes a four-man crew. They cost me $2,000 a day. You invoice it. They're like, well, it should really only take you 2 days, and I think you should have 3 guys.
Well, what if you get a change order and it's agreed upon, it's a change order, and they say, well, this would normally take 7 days, but we want you to add another crew. You got to do it in 3.5. How does that work with change orders? How can you price that as a sub? How can you protect yourself against, because that adds more cost, right? Because you got to get it done quicker.
Either you get it done quicker, or maybe you can build some efficiencies in there. Let's say, for example, they want it 3.5 days, and
it's over a weekend or maybe over a holiday of some sort. All these extenuating circumstances we think don't happen, but they do.
Yeah, and so let's say you're painting the ceiling. Okay.
Okay.
Do you have access to the lifts, or are you going to have to set up scaffolding? Are you sharing scaffolding with someone else? Hey, can I have Thursday and Friday? Can I have the fourth floor free? Then yeah, I can do it in 3.5 days. Well, why do you need it? Because if I can build efficiencies into my schedule, if I can have the use of the entire scaffolding, or if I can have the use of 2 scissor lifts to paint the ceiling, then I can actually save a day. I can do that. Yes, if, so ask for those things. And a lot of times people can work the schedules around. The other side of change order, which is probably the general theme of where this question is coming from, is it's a change order. You have 2 philosophies. You're going to get the work done, or you're like, you have the other philosophy on the contract is like, ooh, this is my chance to mark this up and make money. I don't know. I don't support that level of thinking all the time, because the money has to come from somewhere. And if you understand the total project, you realize it's got to come somewhere.
Yeah.
So if you're the developer on a job, or you're the state or the federal government, whoever the owner is, they've built a budget in for that job. They've financed it somehow, and it's already established. So if you go add an extra $100,000 in there, even if it's within your scope and it's truly a change order, the $100,000 has got to come from somewhere.
Yeah, it's eating into their economics.
It's going to either eat from the GC who hard bid it and missed it and now has to find it from another scope of work, or another trade contractor. They're going to have to go to the owner, and the owner's going to have to put in more cash, or maybe pull from a budget that they did build into it. Maybe they've already used up that budget. Maybe it's early in the project, so there's some of that budget left. I mean, these are things that are just there. It's not like this endless pot of money. So understanding that concept means it's important, because you can only get what's available for someone who's willing to pay. And it doesn't mean the GC is willing to pay it. The owner might not. They might not have the money.
It's just interesting because you're talking, this all sounds like you're operating in an environment of unpredictability, I guess is what I'm saying. And in the event that a change order is not created for some reason driven by the sub, right? It's driven by the owner of the project, or a shortcoming or a bad decision made by the GC, but all that execution risk gets driven downstream, right? And I think given that environment of kind of an unpredictable environment, I think what Scott's saying is seek absolute clarity. Ask follow-up questions, and not just clarity on the definition of a change order as it pertains to your contractual agreement with the GC, but how am I to execute this change order? How am I to price this change order? What are the expectations on this particular change order for execution? Is the timing changed? That's right. And don't be afraid to ask follow-up questions. Clarity is going to save you a lot of pain further down the project life cycle.
Yeah, and the last thing I would add to that too is, what type of change order is it? Are we talking about there's a design flaw and now it's a change, like structural change that impacts across the scope? Well, that's going to be a little easier. The owner is going to recognize that, probably more simple than a change order between you and your general contractor that didn't define the scope as well. But the other general thought I would have in there is, in a world of change orders, i.e. some variable factors that no one planned for, there are things that you can eliminate variably up front. And that is, in your contract, do you have to execute a change order until it's signed? You can put that in. Probably easier to sign, probably easier to get that signed and agreed to before you start, right? You can put how you're going to charge for change orders, who's responsible and when. You can define those terms differently than the regular general scope of the work. So control the variables that you can control up front, so that when you do walk into a variable situation, i.e. a change order, it's by definition variable, the variables that will dictate how that's managed, you've already defined inside of a concrete item called your contract.
And I think in order to work on that change order and execute that change order early on, negotiating that it has to be signed by the project owner or the GC in order for me to do it. And I'm not just going to go out there and start working and kind of wait for it to get signed. I think that's actually pretty critical.
Yeah, or you're at risk.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't get them signed fast enough, but you can get something in an email writing. You can get you can have a conversation with the project manager at the general contractor level, and you can send an email saying, hey, we just had this conversation. You're asking me to do X, Y, and Z. I agreed to do X, Y, and Z. This is what we agreed to do. This is a change of
So
scope.
email, you'd feel comfortable with email?
You want to have documentation at a minimum,
Okay.
especially if you're going to go do the work.
Got
if
it.
you're going to go do the work, don't just assume everybody knows. Get it in writing, get an email out there.
Yeah.
Take pictures of what it looked like, why you think it's a change order. Build some documentation that not only will support yourself, but it also help your project manager. The project manager wants you to get paid too. They're not trying to steal from you. If they can get the owner to sign a change order, it also helps them. So build the documentation and help them help you.
This kind of goes back to the first question. It's like this is a core area where you could differentiate yourself in your process. I mean, listen, a change order is implemented, whoever it may be, project owner at GC. I mean, at the end of the day, they're feeling anxious and nervous too because clearly something either changed because the scope of work expanded or something went wrong or a design flaw. So they're nervous too. So if you as the sub can execute that change order seamlessly and kind of own that process and release that like anxiety burden on your bosses, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
They're going to want to work with you again.
100%.
I mean, it's that quality. It's that seamless, reducing the anxiety of your project owners.
Yeah, you're not a pain in the ass.
You're not a pain in the ass. Yeah.
You're actually helping them.
Yeah.
Debt. Is all debt negative, or can some of it actually be positive?
There's an assumption out there that all debt is negative, that you should be able to self-fund all your projects. If you can self-fund all your projects and you have an endless line of cash coming from somewhere, maybe a family member, maybe you're independently wealthy, then I would absolutely suggest you consider doing that. However, if you look at it economically, depending on your cost of capital, meaning how much the debt actually costs, if you have that endless supply of cash, it might make actually more sense to use someone else's capital and at a lower cost of capital than your equity capital to actually execute the jobs. But that's not the environment that most subcontractors are actually operating in. So it just depends on what your goals are and what kind of debt and what kind of purpose you're using that debt for. As long as you're confident that those dollars of debt, depending on what kind of debt it is, are being pumped into your company and number one, in generating some sort of return above and beyond what you want to make in your company to the bottom line, then it might be productive debt. Secondly, you need to monitor the amount of debt that you have, particularly if it's permanent debt or term debt. If you have a large amount of term debt on your balance sheet and you're allocating a large share of your monthly cash flow to paying off debt, there is a trade-off there because that is cash that you're not able to reinvest into equipment, that you're not able to reinvest into people who are needed to support the growth that is needed to pay off the debt. So you can easily get into like sort of this vicious cycle where you are borrowing to keep the money afloat, but the economics of your company are not favorable enough to actually pay back your debt and to support either normal operations, just doing the status quo, and certainly not able to support the growth needed to actually pay off the debt and widen your margins and have debt being a smaller portion of your burden every single month.
Yeah. The thing with debt too is it depends on like what kind of debt.
Yeah.
What are you using it for? What is your alternatives? Are you using it to take on extra work? I mean, construction also has cycles, right? There's cycles where like it's good, like you want to get after the good, right? And there's cycles where it's bad. Do you want to take on a bunch of term debt going into a bad cycle? Sure, maybe if it's going to help support your flow and you can handle the cost and you have like consistent customers and you can kind of weather the storm, sure. Do you really want to take on that debt? If that's not the case though, no, you don't. You don't want to have term debt. You want to have something you can pay back quickly, or you were using it to help you grow and fuel projects, or you don't need to continue to manage on a term. You can actually just not use it, i.e. like a line of credit or something like that. But the other side of it is what are your alternatives? So you're going into a good market or you're in a good market And you could take on 2, 3, 4 extra jobs, and you can execute them well. You have the labor, you have the material supplies, you have the ability and capability, but you just don't have the cash. So you do 2 projects instead of the 3 or 4. Well, maybe you're not as efficient as you could be because you have this whole labor force, and you're not going to capitalize on this opportunity you have. You've already weathered the cycle of the last 3 or 4 years or the previous decade or whatever it is. And so now you have the capability, know-how, knowledge. You have the market conditions that you can accelerate in, and you need the capital. So it'd be like smart if you could borrow money and allocate it to these jobs and these projects and move forward. What I think a lot of times happens, though, is people think, oh, I want to save all my cash so that I can take advantage of those opportunities. But what happens is they don't make those investments in their company, the infrastructure. That's that superintendent you need. That's the second project manager. That's the executive level. That's the accounting.
And
that's the finance.
can I make a note about that? You do not want to get debt out for that.
No, you don't want debt out for that.
If you go out and say, I'm going to go get debt out so that I can hire more people, you're done. That's a fact. I mean, you need to use your own capital, your own retained earnings to fuel the infrastructure needed to support more job growth. For materials and direct labor and equipment rental expense, those are directly tied to the growth of your company. So you can use some sort of line of credit associated with that because the rules of the line of credit are typically governed by your accounts receivable, which is the business that you've completed and not yet been paid for. It completely aligns to your growth.
Yeah.
But if you just get a slug of term debt for no other reason than just to hire people or invest in marketing or
salespeople,
that is a dangerous fork in the road that if you take it, it's going to be a painful few months.
Yeah, let me explain why that's a painful few months.
Yeah.
Because inherently, a business owner sitting there like, wait a minute, I need to grow. I need salespeople. I need more customers. I'm going to market. Okay, great. No problem. Those work, okay? But are you delivering your service or your product consistently every single time? Do you know your exact cost to deliver that product? Do you know if that you add more on top of what you're already doing? Can you still deliver that product consistently and not? So if your delivery of your performance of your product or your service, whatever it is you offer, and this goes for any business, but definitely for construction, is not good yet and not consistent. Okay, it doesn't mean it's bad, but it's not consistent, or you don't know your numbers. And let's say you borrow debt and the marketing works great and the sales works great and you're delivering this inconsistent product and service that you don't know, and you don't understand where and how, you don't know all the costs to it. All you're going to do is fuel a bad thing, and you're going to end up putting good dollars on top of a system that doesn't work, and you're going to be crushed for it, which is why it's said, and we talk about it, and it's in every book. I'm like, we're not the geniuses that came up with this philosophy. You have to be great at your product or service before you try to scale it, because if you can't control those costs around your delivery of your thing, then when you pour more on top of it, you're just going to be more broken at a faster rate, which is going to accelerate you to bad.
Especially, it makes total sense, especially if you choose the route of using term debt inappropriately.
Correct.
The term debt, meaning it's not a line of credit, meaning it's like a mortgage, right? It gets paid off over a period of time, and you get that total amount of money on day one. And then they term it out. Maybe you have to pay it over 18 months. Maybe you have to pay it over 24 months. But those are larger payments, and you want to align those type of loans to equipment, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's an asset. It's generating revenue. You want to align it to property, right? I mean, but to bring on term debt, which a lot of these, like, for example, some of these merchant cash advances are 18-month term loans, essentially.
Oh, yes.
I mean, they're not even loans. And then you get a second one out to pay the debt service associated with the first one. And then, again, that goes back to that vicious cycle that I'm talking about, guys, that can really get you in trouble.
Yeah. And again, if you don't have an investment for what dollars you're using right away, then it better be tied to a piece of collateral, right? Like equipment or a building, something that is going to either generate some type of asset value for you.
Yeah.
The misconception always is like, well, I want to get as much money as I can at the lowest possible rate.
Yeah. Well.
So let's just use an easy math example. Let's say you got $1 million, okay, term loan, and it's at 7.5%. So it's going to cost you $75,000 a year to manage that.
Yep.
But you don't really have a use for $1 million right away. It feels good. You got it.
That was going to be my first question. Why'd you get it out?
Yeah, you don't have. Yeah, so because it's $1 million, like I'm going to get this marketing going. I'm going to hire these salespeople. I'm going to hire these people. So you've added more costs now.
Yeah.
But yet it doesn't. Those costs don't generate a return, or they're about to generate a return, but you don't know when on the curve they actually become like positive to it.
Yeah, and just a note on that, you want to use that debt to go get a marketing person and 3 salespeople. So what you did, you effectively went from net neutral to $75,000 a year in interest, call it $100,000 for a chief marketing officer, and 2 salespeople making $60,000 a year. Look how much your cost has increased. Plus, on top of that, the term note also requires you to pay back principal every year. So the use of cash there can easily get to $400,000 to $500,000 difference than what you had originally been operating within.
That's right. And then so if you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to spend $500,000 of that on these same items you just mentioned, and I'm going to use the other $500,000 to pay for those costs because I've determined in my mind it takes a year to break even on that. You can at least manage the expense, but you damn well better believe that $500,000 investment is producing some course of at least $500,000 to pay for itself, plus whatever your expectation is above and beyond that within 12 to 18 months, even if you use it that way. What most people don't do that though. You spend the whole $1 million, maybe you pay off some extra debts and things like that that maybe reduce your overall costs. But you now have this burden over the next 6 or 7 years, and you think just because it was a 7.5%, $1 million, it makes great sense. Whereas if you took $100,000 that cost twice as much, for an example, okay, it cost you $15,000, but you were able to use that $100,000 10 times, and every time you use that $100,000,
so you got $1 million in funding,
same million, and it cost you $150,000 to manage over the year.
Sure.
But you were able to do 10 projects more with that $100,000 because you could just flip it and turn it. The ones you wouldn't have been able to do. And each one of those projects paid you an extra $50,000 in profit.
Yeah, so I did $4 million in work.
Yeah. So that's the difference. You borrowed the same 100, you borrowed the same million over the same period of time. You never had more than 100 of exposure, for example.
And also you may not have even had 100 in exposure. It may have been out just when you needed it out.
Right, but you had a very specific intended use. And then over the next 6 months, you took the profit from those jobs and you invested in the marketing person and one salesperson. You invested in the business itself, and you added that on over time to make your performance on your project better and better and better and better, and scaled over a 1, 2, 3, or 4 year period of time. That's a much more healthy, efficient way. And 4 years later, you could be in the same exact spot as you would if you took $1 million with not nearly as much risk.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, guys, understanding your balance sheet and leveraging your balance sheet for growth, which is essentially managing your capital structure to support your growth, is all, and I've said this a million times, it's all about intentional design. I said that in one of my videos earlier. It's all about intentional design and being absolutely prescriptive to every dollar of what you're going to use that debt for and what kind of return is that debt going to generate.
That's right.
Right?
And here's the thing too, if you're in construction, you're thinking, you know what, I got into this business and I'm just great at what I did or what I do.
And that's okay.
Plumbing, electrical, roofing, whatever it may be. Unfortunately, I have to tell you guys, it's too late. You're a business owner. So now these are the things you have to worry about. Okay? You don't get to opt out of that just because you went into plumbing. Okay? You built, congratulations, you built your business. You're now a business owner who owns a plumbing company. And these are the things that you're required to understand if you're going to be successful, or even if at a minimum, you're going to have enough of a business to continue to pay for all of your current employees and your family and all the reasons you did it on your own in the first place. And so don't look at it as a burden, or don't look at it as like you should know, or no, you shouldn't know. Why would you know? Nobody knows until you're in that spot. And kudos to you for getting there. It's just you're required now to figure it out. So You don't have to do that alone. You can work with the right partners. That's another reason why you want to find the right lenders, the right accountants, the right lawyers, the people that know construction that can actually help you and understand where you're at, versus taking some guy or gal who calls you on the phone and tells you how they can give you this money and they don't give two shits about you.
Yeah, I mean, kind of on that point, it's kind of funny. It's like, I can imagine a lot of our construction sort of audience out there who own their own company, maybe it's a younger company, where at some point in their sort of career at a larger construction company, but they kept on asking for more. I want more, I want more, I want to own my own company. And it's like, okay, you're asking for more, and you ask and you shall receive, right? It's not you ask and you shall receive guaranteed profits and riches. It's you ask and you shall receive more responsibility.
That's right.
And when you receive more responsibility, that's a lot more on your shoulders. And if you don't want that responsibility of understanding your financial back office, putting food on the table for your employees, understanding your cash flow cycles, then you're really no different than the guy or gal who used to work at that larger construction company. You're just someone without the cover of that larger construction company.
That's all you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. If my GC knows I need funding in order to complete a job, will they think I'm weak?
I'm kind of tired of hearing sort of this nomenclature, this sort of phrase, like I'm scared to go to my GC to tell them that I have financing, because I don't want them to think that I'm at a point of weakness.
Yeah.
And that's really based on a ton of different assumptions. I mean, are you sure that they're not actually borrowing money too? I mean, are you sure that they're not completely familiar with it? And also the reality of the industry structure that we've talked about endlessly is that they're pushing all the risks downstream to the subcontractors.
That's right.
So if you're pushing all the risks down to the subcontractors, how do you expect them to bear the burden of that risk without actually opening their options to alternative sources of lending? Because I can tell you right now, I don't care how large the GC is. If a owner of a GC company was in a room, right, and he had every sub that he or she ever worked with in their entire career, and he asked the question, nobody in here has ever needed or been constrained by cash flow, right? You never needed a loan or anything. Has anybody in here, they might be lying, but usually 80 to 90% of the people in that room would be raising their hand. Yep. And I don't think the general contractor, the owner, if he's at all in touch with how the industry actually works and what he or she's doing to the subs, would be surprised.
Yeah. Well, here's the other thing. If you are in a situation where you need some financing to do a project and you are afraid to bring it up to your general contractor, then you are weak. You're in a state of weakness and you're now telegraphing that. So why be in a state of weakness? Why not just be like, hey, I'm growing my business, I'm executing work, I don't have a whole bunch of extra cash to finance this particular job.
By the way, Scott, you have every right to grow your business.
And you have every right to grow your business. You're not supposed to have piles of cash around.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you weak.
Yeah.
What makes you weak is presenting something that you're not. And newsflash, they can feel that, which only then makes them more nervous, which only makes them put more hardened constraint on you, which makes them now make it more difficult for you to be successful, and you create this whole scenario. Mm-hmm. If you go to a general contractor and say, look, I just can't, I'd love to do this job for you, but I can't do this job under these terms. I don't have enough working capital to finance your job this far down the path without X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. And so I need some support. I got 3 other jobs going right now. And if you want me to start this one on this schedule, then I'm going to need some help on the terms, right? Or I have a great finance partner and I'm going to need your help to allow me to use that finance partner and what does that mean to you? It means you're going to need to do X, Y, or Z. Mm-hmm. Or I'd love to do this job for you. If you let me start this in 6 weeks, when this one other job comes off, I can easily manage it myself. Mm-hmm. Totally different scenario.
Also, the delivery of that conversation is extremely important. And this is not even just with subs to GCs in the context of what we're talking about. At the end of the day, don't be delivering anything, especially when you're negotiating anything, out of desperation.
Yeah.
Present it in a way, I'm well prepared, I'm being proactive, I'm getting ahead of obstacles that I anticipate. You go back to that if question that you're talking about. That's going to be received a lot different than, man, you're really crushing me right here. I got to go get financing because there's no other way for me to do it. No, don't say that. Say, I want to do this job, but I'm also doing a ton of other jobs. I know I can execute this. What I am going to do is I am going to work with my financing partner so that I can crush this for you and get this done on time and get it done to the highest quality that you expect it to be done. Yeah. Almost drive own the conversation.
Yeah, so when I'm in these situations, I have a great finance partner that I use to do X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Done.
Yeah.
With confidence. And they may say, well, I don't want you to use a finance partner. I'm like, okay, no problem. Well, here's what I need from you then. I'll invoice you every Friday. You can pay me within 14 days. I can get into the cycle and we'll get, well, I don't want to do that. I'm like, okay, well, here's another scenario. I can start 2 months from now. Well, no, I need you to start now. Like, okay, well, then I have a bank. I have a finance partner. I have the capability to do that job here, and I just need.
And if they're not amenable to that, then there has to be some sort of understanding, equal. I'm not saying equal playing field, but some sort of mutual respect. And if they're not amenable to any of that, then they don't value your company's work as much as maybe you thought they did. And if they don't value your company's work specifically as much as you thought they did, they're going to be a bear to work with.
And it's a job you should pass on.
Yeah, it's a job you should pass on.
Yep. Thank you all again for joining us. Drew and I are having a great time answering these questions.
Speaking of the questions, Scott, just real quick, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're answering all these questions, guys. I mean, the reality is we'd rather be hearing from you. You could contact Scott or I, but the best format is going to marketing@mobilizationfunding.com. We are way more interested in the questions that you guys have, and not just questions. If you have any comments or thoughts, we can talk about those on this podcast. We want to engage you guys, and at the end of the day, the most important thing is sort of what's on y'all's minds. And I know we have answers, and if we don't have answers, we'll figure it out or find someone that does.
I love that. You know what we'll do?
Yeah.
Marketing@mobilizationfunding.com. Send your questions there. The team will pull them.
Yep.
And when we do this next episode, we'll ask those exact specific questions that come right from there.
Yeah, the next podcast we could do.
Perfect.
It's awesome.
All right, everybody. Drew, that was a great idea. I like it. Enjoy, have a great week, and may God bless you.